He was supposed to have somebody, one of the players, interview him. For whatever reason, it didn't work out. So I had the honor of interviewing him before his 4,000th broadcast, which I'll never forget.
One of my favorite things about Steve is his consistency and how it's really hard to pull him away from the microphone. You think about more than 4,000 Bees games called. He was telling me the other day that he's only missed 25 games in the history of the team. So to me, this is somebody who is going in there when he's tired, maybe when he's feeling under the weather. He has such a high threshold for what is worth missing a game, and I really admire that about him.
Do we have time between now and breakfast? I think the story that really stands out, and this may not be one of Steve's favorite stories, but for me, but it was either 1994 or 95, I believe, when the Albuquerque Dukes were here in Salt Lake. And Steve had some sort of a mishap in the booth and bumped himself and actually became unconscious for a while. And the Albuquerque broadcaster, they had two broadcasters, Mike Roberts and Jim Lawwill, both of whom I worked with later on. But Jim Lawwill noticed there was a problem. He came in and put the headsets on and was starting to broadcast the Bees game. And I think he said something like, "This is your mystery broadcaster, and Steve's having a little problem." And then somebody from the local radio station came up and tried to take over for Jim Lawwill. And we, as I understand, nearly had an international incident. But that, maybe not the most pleasant memory, but a memorable one.
So one of my favorite Klauke stories is when I was an intern, he was here with, we were playing Memphis, and the broadcaster Steve Selby was with him at batting practice. And if you know Steve Selby, they look like they are the exact same. They have the exact same haircut, which is no hair. They were about the same size. And my boss goes, "Hey, there's Steve and his brother." And I believe that Steve's brother was also named Steve and had broadcast from this league for a solid couple hours before somebody told me that I was an idiot.
I don't know if it's a story, but one of the things I really kind of admire about Steve is that when you're a Pacific Coast League broadcaster for a long time, you go to the same cities over and over again, and it can get kind of monotonous. And Steve decided to take up a hobby. So he's a huge fan of the TV show Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives, and he decided that to make traveling in the Pacific Coast League more interesting for him, he was going to try to go to lunch at every restaurant featured on that show in all of the Pacific Coast League cities, and he would drive 90 minutes each way to go to some restaurant for lunch that was featured on that show, and in Colorado Springs or something, and that's sort of what he did to entertain himself on the road. And I thought it was kind of cool that he came up with something fun to do that kind of killed time on the road and that he liked.